Imagine sitting down at a gig in Stockholm, striking up a conversation with the person next to you and realising that you're talking to a man who didn't just witness music history, he helped package and sell it. From the tactile era of vinyl through to the invisible world of streaming, he's seen it all. Welcome back to the Undercurrent Stories podcast. I'm your host, Bob Wells. This show is all about the stories we find when we actually take the time to listen. Today's episode is a special one. It's the result of a chance meeting at a Quint Starkie gig with a man named Sven Ake Peterson. Sven spent his entire career as a music executive for EMI in Sweden. We're talking about a career spent in the company of icons, David Bowie, Paul McCartney, Tina Turner. But more than that, we're talking about the soul of the industry. We dive into the transition from physical records to the digital age, what it actually takes to make it, and where the music world is headed next. Beyond the industry talk, this conversation is a testament to why you should always talk to strangers. You truly never know what you might learn or whose hand you're shaking. So here's my conversation with the delightful and incredibly warm and insightful Sven Peterson. Hello and welcome to Undercurrent Stories, Sven.
Hello, Bob. I'm so pleased to be with you. Am I the first Swedish person on the show?
You are. However, I'm going to put a little caveat here, Sven, because our good mutual friend Quint Starkie is English, but he's lived in Sweden for many years. So I don't know whether you would call him half Swedish.
He's half Swedish, that's for sure. But yeah. I'm so pleased to be on the show and honored, and it's going to be fun speaking English for a while because I used to speak English all day through at EMI, but these days, you rarely speak it.
Excellent. So how are you?
I'm excellent. To be 77, you think you would have more relaxing time.
You're not 77.
I am.
Are you?
I was born in 1948.
That's so what? That's 10 years before me.
Yeah. I could guess when you wanted to talk about T-Rex and Bowie. I had my best friend. I'm doing music quizzes.
I noticed that.
Together with my friend Ronnie, and he is the biggest T-Rex fan in Sweden.
Oh, is he?
And he goes to all the conventions in England, and we've been to Mark's grave, at Boulder's Green, together. And I guess that you were born around 60, is it, or
1958, December 1958? I was born.
Well, there you go.
10 years after you.
Yeah. 10 years after, another good band.
I saw Alvin Lee in a band called, what was it called? 10 Years Later.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, with, I'm trying to remember his name, the bassist.
Rick Lee.
Was it? Oh, yeah, Alvin Lee was the guitarist, wasn't it? And
Rick was the bass player. And then,
was he?
No, it was, Rick was the drummer. It's Leo Lyons.
Leo Lyon, that's it, yeah. And Leo Lyons had a recording studio in Oxfordshire, and I was in a band in the 80s, and we recorded a demo there, and he had this beautiful house, and I remember it. It was very, very good.
I get all these funny phone calls all the time, and about, I think, 10 years ago, Rick Lee phoned me saying, hey, do you know how we can get on the bill to Sweden Rock? That's a big festival down south in Sweden.
Yeah.
And I said, well, have you tried? Well, they weren't too keen. They asked if Alvin was in the band, and he isn't anymore, of course. And,
no.
Well, poor Alvin is gone now.
Yes. Well, it was great to meet you. Yeah, we met when Quint was playing at a gig at a bar in Stockholm when I came over for a weekend just before Christmas.
Yeah.
And it was great talking to you. You invited me to come and sit down with a bunch of guys. You were there. I'd never met you before. And then we immediately hit it off talking about music. And when I sort of saw what you'd done as a career as a music executive, and the portfolio of people that you had been, I couldn't believe it. And I could have, I could have talked to you for hours. However, I'd got up at 1 a.m. to get a plane, and I was just dropping, I think, at that time. But it's great to have you on. Could you, before we talk about your life in music, Sven, please could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your life growing up and how you got into music?
Well, I grew up in a city about 2 hours south of Stockholm. It's called Norrköping, a typical working class city. With industries, we had paper industries, linen, textile. And of course, like all industry cities, we had a good football team. So it was, I guess, a bit like Liverpool or something. Fantastic time. This is the early 50s. So before television arrived. So my first 8-9 years was without television. Can you imagine?
Wow.
And what did we do? Well, we did so much fun, a lot of family stuff, like picnics, playing games together, things that perhaps you don't do as much today with the family.
Yeah.
So it's a rosy time, I remember. We were a typical working class. My father was an engineer for Philips. The Philips, what do you call it? They make gramophones and tape.
Yeah, the electrical.
They had a big office and factory in Norrköping. So he was like a chief engineer there, which was fantastic because we always had the latest equipment at home. Whenever there was a new invention called the transistor or a reel-to-reel tape recorder, we had it. And it was a home filled with music. We had a piano at home. Mom and Dad played. In the early 50s, there were more sheet music, actually, than records. I think the change between the sales of sheet music and records is around 1950, 52, 3. Then it sort of started disappearing and records took over.
Yeah.
So that was, a fab time growing up.
Yeah, I bet it was the beginning of rock and roll. And am I right in saying that you were in a band called Bobby Silver and the Bebop Hoppers?
No, I wasn't. It's just a fun name on Discogs, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
I think that was an invention. We did a thing with Blue Swede. They had a number one in America called Hooked on a Feeling, and I think I'm on the record. I don't know how, but it's just a fun name. But I was in a band, and it was called Madison Drive, and it was a cover band. We mostly did Chicago stuff, Blood, Sweat and Tears, soul, rock things,
Yeah.
in my teens.
And what instruments do you play, Sven?
I play guitar, but in the band I played bass. So that was it.
Yeah.
But anyway,
multi-instrumentalist.
Well, I tell you something which I can't really believe, that when I was in the band, we had saxophone, trombone, and the trumpet, plus, of course, a B3 Hammond and, the usual. But I actually wrote the scores for the horn section. I can't believe I did it on guitar.
Wow.
Fun days.
Yeah. So tell us how you got into the music industry yourself when it first started. Was it something you'd always wanted to do, or did you fall into it? Or
no, I just
get into it.
It was I had so much fun I went to the university, went into this band, met this girl, of course, and after I did my military service, I didn't really know what to do. I'd studied and taken a degree in English literature, languages like English, Swedish, and stuff. I didn't really have an idea what I wanted to do. Then she saw an ad in the biggest daily paper in Sweden, a very funny ad, and it said, "We're looking for a repertoire man. Are you interested in pop? Do you know anything about pop? Are you good in languages? Are you outspoken? Are you, lots of things." And then she said, "This sounds perfect for you." So I replied to the ad, and lo and behold, after a few interviews, I got the job, Wow. And it didn't even mention the word marketing. It said, EMI is looking for a repertoire man.
Wow. So you weren't really 100% sure about what you would be doing?
Not at all, I'd say. I just knew I wanted to work with music. It was my big passion. Because, in the 60s, I think we were ahead of England because around 1960 there was a ship outside in the Baltic Sea, a pirate ship sending pop music. I think they were inspired by Radio Luxembourg. And this ship eventually became Radio Caroline's ship, because this ship didn't work for more than, say, 2 years, 60 to 62. I think Radio Caroline started around 64-5.
Okay, so the pirate radio was started in Sweden, did it?
Well, I don't know, but we were early, and I was fascinated, writing down every chart, listening to every record. Started buying EMI every week. I had a shop in Norrköping. I told them to please fix me a copy every week, and I did, So I'd read EMI for 7-8 years before I even started with EMI. So I would say I was fairly up to date what was happening.
You were very knowledgeable. I just going back to Radio Luxembourg, I remember as a young teenager going to bed and having my transistor radio and listening to Radio Luxembourg, and it would sort of come in and come out again in terms of its sound.
Yeah.
And when there was they used to have this thing called the Radio Luxembourg Power Play. So you'd have something like Telegram Sam by T-Rex.
I know.
And it would be the worst possible sound at that time. So you would end up having to wait another hour to hear it again.
I remember I had this, it was called medium wave. Is it called medium wave?
Yes, yes.
Before FM was invented. So you always had to have your hand on the dial because you had to change it, all the time.
It was 208, if I remember.
Yeah.
Radio Luxembourg 208. And you're right, you had to sort of just tweak the dial a little bit.
Yeah.
So when you got into a marketing job,
I got into the job, and it was called a label manager. And in those days, in the early 70s, the business was just booming, rising very, very quickly after the 60s. In the 60s, mostly I think they sold singles. The album sale didn't really start until the very late 60s. And it's funny. Do you know what album was at number one for the longest time in America in the 60s? Number one for 54 weeks. It was a soundtrack, and it was the first album I ever bought. West Side Story.
Oh, yeah.
That's the longest running number one album ever, still is in America. Yeah. So anyway, the business was really taking off, selling more and more albums when I started. So I got in at, can you say, the right time? Because everyone was just... And not only the music business, but everyone wanted to have the best PA at home and the best stereo equipment. So it was, the 70s was the age of loudspeakers and, amplifiers. And not only that, the artists started playing bigger and bigger arenas. So it was growing in all areas.
And what did a label manager do?
The label manager was like a spider in the web of the music company. Basically, I was in touch with all the labels I handled. And in my case, it was Chrysalis who just started their business. They brought with them 3 artists that they had worked with at Durham and other companies. And they were Procol Harum 10 years after and Jethro Tull. So they brought them to Chrysalis. And it was a fantastic start for me. And also United Artists, which was a fun label. They had their offices in Mortimer Street in London, in Mortimer House. And they had a great A&R guy called Andrew Lauder. And he had worked with, I think he started with the Bonzo Dog Band, went to Hawkwind, went to Dr. Feelgood, and then on through the Stranglers and much else. Many others. I think for somebody who was very interested in music and enthusiastic about music, it must have been absolutely fantastic. You must have loved your job. I keep telling everyone I've had the best job ever for all my life, and I had so much fun. And basically what I did as a label manager, EMI, of course, was a big London company. but they also had affiliates in so many countries. I think it was about 40 countries in the world. And in Stockholm was one of them, the EMI office. And what you should remember is that not only did we market the international artists in Sweden, but we also signed our own artists and marketed them. And I, being a label manager, you were like a spider in the web. You had to push sales, push promotion, marketing, make sure we had everything in stock, come up with ideas, do compilations if you needed to. Many things.
And sort of be involved with the artists themselves, I guess.
Oh, of course. Every time an artist was in Sweden, we look after them as far as hotels, dinners, television shows, radios. The only time we could relax was when they did the actual gig, because then it was the promoter who made sure they got to the gigs, of course.
So who are some of the first artists that you work with, Sven?
Oh, the funny thing, it's great to be called Sven again. I haven't been called that for 10 years.
What do they call you?
Well, you see, my real name is Ake. And Ake is a very Swedish name. It's A with a ring above the A and K-E. So that's what I was called for the first 20 years. Then I started with EMI. And my very first artist was Frank Zappa. After 2 weeks, I went to the airport to pick up Frank because we had a soundtrack called 200 Motels with Zappa. And he was here to do promotion. And I went to the airport and say, "Hello, Frank, my name is Walker." "Hi, Walker, how are you?" He said, and I thought, Walker, that's weird. So I picked up my second name. I have 2 surnames. And Sven is my name after my father. So that's what I was for 45 years with EMI.
So have you gone back to Ake now?
No, to make it even more difficult, it's Sven Ake now for most. So they know who it is.
So Frank Zappa, was that before Joe's Garage?
This was just before, he wasn't actually an EMI artist. It was just this soundtrack. But I remember this is just 2 or 3 weeks before the terrible fire in Montreux. Do you remember that?
I remember. I heard about it. Yeah.
When Deep Purple did the song "Smoke on the Water," it even mentions in the lyrics that Frank Zappa. They went to see Frank Zappa played that night, and they were there to record. So that happened just after that time in Stockholm.
So you were brought up at the beginning of rock and roll and everything, and then you got into music, which I would say was probably, we look back now, the late 60s and the 70s as a sort of golden period in music.
Yes. I mean, when I went to the university, I started buying all these albums just before I went to EMI, and the albums I bought were obviously, the Beatles, Jefferson Airplane, Simon and Garfunkel, all the big albums in the late 60s. Yeah. So,
Now, I'd like to talk about some of the artists, if I may.
Sure.
And we're not going to we could be here for 24 hours talking about the numbers of people. So going back to our brief conversation when we were in the bar in Stockholm, I think the story about Paul McCartney was quite an interesting one. Are you happy to share that?
Yeah, well, Paul has been in Sweden so many times. And this particular time, I think he wanted to have some relaxing time after Linda passed away. So he called us up saying, "Can I come over?" And what do you want to do? Well, just relax and meet some nice Swedish musicians and composers. And so me and the publishing company gathered together a few people, and we had the greatest time first with those. And then we went to dinner and had a fantastic time. I remember we thought we should bring along some girls to make it a bit more mixed. So we had a girl group at EMI, and we invited them to the dinner and put them, fairly close to Paul, and he liked it. He was in, and I heard him saying, "Oh, where are you girls going?" "Oh, we're going to Australia to promote our single." "Have you ever been to Australia, Paul?" "Yes," said Paul. And then he explained what he had done in Australia, and they explained. And it was such a fun evening. And afterwards, when Paul went back to the hotel, I said to the girls, "Did you like this dinner?" "Yes, we can't wait to get back to our parents to tell them all about it." I think they thought it was more fun to tell the parents, actually, that they met McCartney. Yeah.
No. What was Paul like as a person?
Paul has always been I'm so impressed that he's still touring. He's older than I am, and he's still touring. And whenever he's been to Sweden, probably around 15 concerts here over my period, he's always had these 1-hour sound checks before every gig, even if he has 2 or 3 gigs at the same venue 3 days in a row. He still has a sound check the following day for an hour. Wow. And that's impressive. And at the sound checks, he always plays songs that he never plays in the concerts, So, and whenever you're backstage, you always hear when he's coming and he's going, because he's always singing and cheering and in a good mood. Wonderful personality.
I watched the documentary, the Apple documentary that came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
And you could see that his work ethic was tremendous. He was a lot of the other guys in the band were wanting to relax and go out, but he kept pushing and driving.
Yes. And I think everything is true about he keeping the Beatles together in the last 2-3 years, when they were going in different directions. I think he was the guy who brought it together. Yeah.
So, although your role didn't encompass recording as such, did you ever spend time in recording studios?
Oh, many. When you have this job, you travel a lot. I've been to England perhaps 100 times, and you visit not only record companies, you visit concert studios, you have, conferences, so many wonderful times in studios. And let me recall, I recall when I used to work with the Electric Light Orchestra, and Sweden was the first country that went to #1 with a new world record. And they had a manager called Don Arden. Have you heard of him?
I have.
He was a manager already in the 60s for various bands, and then he came into Electric Light Orchestra. So Don was very, very, what do you say, he had a reputation for being quite tough. But I was always a favorite because we were the first country to take them to #1. But anyway, when they did the follow-up to a new world record, it was called Out of the Blue. It's a double album. Then he invited me down to Musicland in Munich, and we spent the whole day there at the playback of the new album. And it's such a lovely memory because we all heard that the album was fantastic. From was it Turn to Stone, I think, was the opening track. And then it just went on and was, what a lovely memory. So yes, lots of studios in Los Angeles, of course. I've been there, not only to the Capitol studios, but to other places where our artists have recorded. And
yes, it was a good album, wasn't it? I remember Mr. Blue Sky was a classic.
Yeah.
A little piece of opera.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Okay, so moving on to some of the bands that were particular, and we'll talk about Sweden a bit later, but some of the bands that were very successful in the UK. David Bowie. Tell us about your experiences with David Bowie.
Well, David came into my life not only until the early 80s. In the 70s, he was with RCA, and I didn't really... I did see him once in 76, when actually Bolan was, I think, visiting him not performing with him as far as
Bolan, did you say? Sorry, Bolan.
Yeah, not as far as I can remember, but Bolan came to Helsinki to hear an album. He also followed to Stockholm. I ran into them at a restaurant in Stockholm, but I didn't work with him, so I didn't really talk to them then. No. But then Bowie came into our lives in 82, I think, when he did the Queen single.
Oh, yeah.
And then he did this wonderful soundtrack song called This Is Not America with Pat Metheny. And so that kicked off our relationship. And of course, then came Let's Dance and everything went crazy. So a lot of fun things with David in about 8-9 years, all through the 80s, basically.
Mm. What was he like as a person? What were your memories of him?
Oh, the kindest and warmest person I can ever think of. A few examples. Full of surprises he was. Once we did a press conference in Stockholm. I think the album was Tonight, which was the album after Let's Dance. No, it was Never Let Me Down. Oh, yeah. And he was going to do a tour called the Glass Spider Tour at the end of the 80s. And he came over to do a promotion for the tour. And I didn't know he was going to bring his whole band, but he did. And just when he arrived, he said to me and the promoter, can we do a few songs live for the press? And we found in like hours, we found a club where they could do it. And he said, can we have a few fans here? And we said, well, we have a few hours. How do we rustle up some fans? But we managed to get the word going, so that it was jam-packed in the place, and totally surprising, to have him perform live at a small club.
Must have been. I was going to say it must have been absolutely amazing seeing it at an impromptu gig.
It was absolutely, and I was standing backstage, and beside me, I looked at Peter Frampton. And, he was like a big hero favorite from, to me in the 70s. And I said, it's wonderful to see you here in Stockholm. Yeah, I'm so grateful for the job. He was in the band. And I think he's probably had a few slow years, in the early 80s. So he was grateful to be in the band. Yeah. And it was wonderful. And that's just an example. Another example I remember was that we did some interviews at another occasion, and one of the journalists was late, and when the journalist arrived, it was a woman, she was a bit, not in the best shape, and David noticed this, and any other artist perhaps would say, sorry, if you're not up for it, we skip it. But he said, oh, take my key, have a rest. Can we do another interview first? And then we'll do yours in an hour. That kind of warm, friendly personality. Another fun dinner. In Gothenburg, I think it was in 87, Iggy Pop was the opening act. And then after the show, they said, hey, can we go and have dinner? So it was a fantastic experience sitting along with a few other people next to Iggy and David and hear them chat about the old days. I don't think they had spent so much time together up until this tour. And, amazing.
So you were just listening to them talking about...
Listening, but also cutting in sometimes. David and I have sons that are the same age, and they both were around 9-10 when we met at this occasion. So I remember talking about bringing up boys and being fathers and advice here and there and how they are, and So I think when you're out having dinner with artists, you always try and find personal things to talk about rather than the normal music business stuff. Yeah.
I think it's the same when I was in business. When you went out in the evening, you didn't talk about what you did with the business. It was all about personal things and sports and
and interests. I mean,
yeah.
some artists. I remember Ray Davies came over for a solo tour called the Storyteller Tour, and we went to dinner. And I knew he was into movies, so we spent an evening talking about Polanski, Bergman, movie making. Favorite movies. So that was fun.
Obviously, with the amount of conversations and listening and observing some of these major artists, can you put it down to a secret ingredient that makes their success, or are they just lucky?
I think my experience is that the bigger the artists are, usually the more organized they are and more friendly and easy to work with. It's perhaps the young up and coming that can sometimes be a bit disorganized, and cause a stir. But I remember in the punk years, some of the bands, were a bit crazy, but I think it was part of their image, to jump on tables and interrupt things and be rude and so forth. Yeah. But you wouldn't find that with an established artist.
So organized, kind, they can get on with people. They're professional.
Yes, very few. I will not mention any names, but there are very few that have, really behaved badly. Very, very few. Very few.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah,
and we mentioned Mark Bolan a bit earlier on.
Yeah,
you saw him in the.
I didn't know it at the time, but I did see his final concert ever.
Right. Yeah.
And it was in Stockholm in '77 at the Tivoli Gröna Lund in Stockholm. And I didn't know it at the time, of course, that it would be the last concert. And it wasn't really that exciting. It was cold and not too many people. But good. I mean, it was a good gig, but nothing extraordinary.
No. Did you get involved with him earlier than that in the music business?
No, I didn't, because I was not handling his. We had various label managers, and Mark was handled by another guy at EMI in Sweden.
Yeah. We briefly spoke about the fact that there are a lot of UK artists that were sort of not particularly successful in the UK or mediocre, but actually in Sweden, they were very, very successful. Could you talk about some of them?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, did you know that the Beatles' first ever tour abroad was in Sweden? Did you know?
No, I didn't know that. No.
In the autumn of '63, just before She Loves You came along, they went to Sweden for a week-long tour, including 5 gigs, a radio show and a TV show. And this sort of started a reputation for Sweden being, it's close to England, it's only a boat ride away, and so many bands came here, touring starting in the 60s, basically. And it in those days, you could release any single you wanted. You had more freedom. So I always remember when in later years, when I met bands like the Hollies, for instance, they say, "Oh, we're in Sweden. We got to rehearse these 3 songs," because they were big hits in the 60s, and they were not normally in their set,
No.
So yeah, and some of the artists I remember I did an album with Paul Jones, Paul, who used to sing with Manfred Mann and the Blues Band. And he became very popular in Sweden for some reason. He toured a lot here with a Swedish band. And in England, I think he had 2 hit singles. I've Been a Bad, Bad Boy and High Time, I think. In Sweden, he had 10 top 10 singles. Wow. So that's just an example of how things can be really different.
Yes.
And that has continued ever since. Few more examples. Well, I managed to be very successful. We were with a band called Katrina and the Waves. And they only had 1 hit, I think, in England, or in most of the world. And it was Walking on Sunshine. Oh, and then they did the Eurovision. They won the Eurovision much later.
I remember.
Yeah. But anyway, they came to Sweden. They went down a storm in Sweden, and we sold gold, had several hit singles. So in those cases, you get the bands here more and more often because they have a bigger market here than at home. And that's just an example. There are more. And also American artists. Because you see this format like they have perhaps in England too, but in America, it's rock or pop and some artists, I remember Little Steven, the guy with Springsteen.
Yes, I saw him, Little Stevie and the something band. I saw him at Reading in 83.
Yeah, he signed with EMI as a solo artist called Little Steven and the Disciples of Soul.
Yes.
And he went perfect in Sweden, gold records and everything. But in America, his home country, they couldn't really break him because the radio thought he was too political. Some of his lyrics were about South America, but in Sweden that's just an advantage being an outspoken person. So the format in Sweden is not as strict as in America. So,
possibly more liberal.
Yeah, and but it can sometimes create problems when you break an artist in another country, like in France or in Germany or in Sweden, and they become big, and then the mother company perhaps wants to drop them because they don't sell in their own country. And then you end up perhaps losing an artist you really want to keep. So that's happened several times.
The other artist I'd like to talk about, Sven, is your work with Tina Turner.
Oh, yes. Can you guess how many times I've had Tina in Sweden?
Well, do you know what? It'd be silly for me to guess because I've no idea, I'm afraid.
I think it's 23 times.
Oh, wow.
And it started with Ike and Tina, one of the first gigs I ever had in Stockholm, 72, 3, probably. So Ike and Tina were here for a few tours in the 70s. And then she had some rough years in the late 70s. And then she came back and did her fantastic career as a solo artist from the 80s onwards. I was her label manager and got to know her really well and see her, grow up and become the happy big artist she always deserved to be. And,
it was an amazing transformation, wasn't it?
It was, and it's many thanks to Roger Davis, who was her manager, and he also handled Olivia. He had a vision for Tina that she shouldn't just, if you can say just, she couldn't just be a soul singer, and she should be a big mainstream pop artist as well. So it was his idea to bring out in these compositions from other people, and it was so funny when I heard your episode with Martin Ware.
Martin Ware, yes.
And he talked about the session in London, and I have a very special memory around that. It was in 83, and the big Tivoli in Stockholm, we talked about it, where Bolan played also, and many, many others. They celebrated their 100th year anniversary. So they called us up saying, do you think it's possible to get Tina Turner for this celebration? And I said, I doubt it, because she's not really doing any recordings at the moment. And usually, you only get the artist when they have a new album or something, and then they're available. Yes. But I said, let's take a chance. So we forwarded the request to Los Angeles. And for some reason, it was perfect timing because Roger Davis said that we had to come up with some money to go to London and spend some time in London to record. So this gig in Stockholm turned in very, very perfect timing. And Tina came and she did, I think, 10 songs live with a big band at the Tivoli, broadcast live on television. in the evening, and she did a fantastic job. And I remember at the dinner afterwards at a nightclub in Stockholm, she was so happy, up and dancing, and she said, "I'm going to London to record tomorrow, and it's with a band, and I can never remember their name, Heaven something, 17, I said. Yeah. So that was just the night before she went and did this fantastic Let's Stay Together that started the whole comeback.
It was an excellent song. We've been talking about international artists.
Yes.
And what we haven't spoken about yet are some of the Swedish artists. And obviously we're all very familiar with the big ones, and one particular big one, ABBA. For me, Europe were a pretty good band, or are still a pretty good band. What was your experience with some of the Swedish bands, Sven?
I remember 1974 when ABBA won in Brighton. Just the same week, I think it was, a Swedish act was #1 in America on Billboard's Hot 100 with Ooga Chaka, Ooga Ooga, Blue Swede, Hooked on a Feeling, #1. I think that's the first Swedish #1 in America. So obviously a lot of press from then on about Sweden and Swedish music. And it's just been continuing and going ever since, and it never stopped. No. And now in the last 10 years, I've read that Max Martin has had 30 #1 records in America as a producer, for all these, Britney and onwards.
Did you say Max Martin?
Max Martin is the producer.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
And songwriter for so many artists. But in between, I mean, it's been and many people ask, why are there so many Swedish artists successful in abroad? And I think it's always, whenever you hear Benny Andersson of ABBA or Per Gessle of Roxette speak about Sweden, they mention that in school they always had the opportunity to learn music, study music. They had rehearsal space, instruments. So it's like a tradition in Sweden to have that. And also I think the formatting of Swedish radio was important, that in the 70s when, ABBA and Roxette and all these started, the radio could play Led Zeppelin, one song, and then came a folk song, and then you could have any mixture on the radio. You heard so many different types of music. It was never formatted until more recently. So that's good.
Yeah, I think it was good. And it was exactly the same in the UK. In the 1960s, you had the Light programme. Mm-hmm. And again, you would have the Beatles, then you'd have Vera Lynn, and then you'd have something else, and then Jimi Hendrix, and then they had Radio 1 and Radio 2. And now you've got it where you can basically, whatever type of music you're into, you can get into that genre, but only that genre.
And it's quite boring, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. You end up in an echo chamber.
You turn on the radio, you know exactly what to get. It should be more interesting, I think.
I think so. I think it opens your mind, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So you've had a great career. What are you most proud of?
Oh, I'm proud of the fact that I turned my biggest hobby and interest into a profession I didn't even know I wanted, or I didn't study for it. It just happened, and so I'm proud that I was able to turn my dream into a work, basically. And I survived for so long at EMI. There were some tough years when I remember when Pirate Bay came in early 2000, and everyone started downloading. There were redundancies and cutbacks, and I survived all the way until EMI finally went under in 2012, I think. So it was a long time.
It was a long time, and you saw so many changes, didn't you? I mean, in
Yes.
your life, if we start before your entry into the music industry,
Yeah.
music, before it was bands, rock and roll, sheet music and everything, and then going into vinyl record production, through punk, through disco, through new wave, electronic music,
and the
and then
golden
Spotify.
and the golden age in the 80s and 90s was somebody invented something called the CD. Remember CDs?
Yes. We thought they were going to be there forever, didn't we?
Yeah, but when they invented the CD, we said, are we going to resell every album we ever done? Yes, you can. So we all started releasing all the things again, making new compilations, making so much money on the same catalog once more,
So from a business perspective, it was the golden age for record companies.
It was fantastic. And then TV advertising started. In England, I think it was a few years ahead of us. EMI started with a series called Now That's What I Call Music. And we all did similar hit compilations in other countries. And you could bring out artists that have been forgotten for many, many years and bring them back again. I remember once I got in touch with a dress company, a clothing company in Stockholm, who were interested in promoting Dean Martin, the Dean Martin look, the gentleman hat and suit and everything. And I said, what a perfect opportunity to remarket Dean Martin. And I told England that I wanted to do a new compilation with Dean Martin and TV advertising. And they said, are you crazy? He's been in the budget bins for 30 years. You can't sell him at full price. And, well, I would like to try. So we did, and we sold a lot of records. And that proved that if you have the right opportunity, you can remarket an artist and change an image again,
And of course, you've got different generations coming through, haven't you?
Yes.
Haven't really heard it.
And some artists can relate to newer, younger generations. And I think Sinatra and Dean Martin, that, they're timeless, really.
You retired, did you say 2014?
2014, I spent the last 2 years at Warner because in Sweden, EMI was bought by Warner because Universal bought it for the world, but they had to give it up in, I think it was 7 countries, because otherwise they would have been too big, for regulatory reasons. So it was a nice last couple of years with Warner, integrating the EMI catalog with Warner, and also making sure that most things were released on Spotify, which was, of course, a Swedish invention.
Of course. So, I was going to talk about Spotify. So we've got Spotify.
Yeah.
And it seems, streaming is the way that the majority of people, I think, listen to music these days. Although there has been a bit of not so much a comeback because it was always underground, but there's been a bit more of a mainstream appreciation of vinyl, which seems to be...
it's a small, tiny business. Yeah.
What are your thoughts, and what are your people that the music industry? What are your thoughts about how the music industry is going to go forward?
Well, I love Spotify. We had a, do you call it a beta version or a trial version?
Yes, beta version.
For almost a year before it was launched, because they were keen to have our opinion before they launched how they could improve it. So when it was actually launched, it was quite good from the beginning, and obviously we were skeptical at first when we had meetings with them, because we thought, Pirate Bay downloading, it's destroyed our business. How can we turn it around? But they convinced us, and in the end they were right, so I love it. And it's like if you're a music fan like you and I, you have it like the biggest candy bag ever you can pick from every day, whatever you want to hear. Yeah. And it's amazing. And of course, there's been a lot of talk about how they pay the artists and the composers. And And it's not going to be the same as it was with records. That's never going to happen. But if you get a good hit, you have quite a lot of money from Spotify. But of course, it's bad for the more narrow artists or the more non-commercial artists. It's not good, streaming.
And what are your thoughts on AI in terms of how that's going to affect the music industry?
I was actually involved with Google has an office in Stockholm, and they called me up and said, "Do you want to be on a panel about AI?" And I said, "Hey, do you know how old I am?" And they said, "Yeah, but you were around when sampling started back with the Beastie Boys and 40 years ago." And I said, "Oh yes, I remember that. We had a lot of trouble, with clearing samplings that appeared on our records with people like MC Hammer, Vanilla Ice, Beastie Boys, all this." So I remember those legal problems and difficulties. So I was on the panel, and it was fun. And it's still, perhaps you follow the news, that all the major big companies today, they sue certain platforms because they want to have more money. But they also make deals, on the other hand, with the same platforms about making new music with AI. So it's a mixed, I think Universal and Sony and all these big ones, they have to have two views on the whole thing, that you can't stop it, so you might as well make arrangements with them, but you still have to fight for the master owners. It's not an easy solution to it. Perhaps it will end up the same way as it did with compact disc. Also in the 70s, we have something called a cassette, a music cassette. And I remember when it was launched, we thought, oh, now they're going to buy one copy of each album and then tape it for all the friends. Yeah. But of course, that didn't happen. It was a tax instead on the cassette that went back to the industry. When the CD was launched, it was a tax again on compact, empty, compact discs. So I think it'll be a tax, some sort of tax. Yeah.
What's your view on, and are you listening to any contemporary artists?
Oh, sure. We do music quizzes, and I have a grandchild, so I'm always up to date with Ariana Grande and all these new artists. I think there's still good music being done. One thing that puzzles me, Bob, is that when did you last hear a big band breaking in the world? I mean, a big pop or rock band.
It's very much solo artists, isn't it?
I can't even think of when I left. We had Coldplay on EMI, and obviously Coldplay was huge and a huge pop and rock band. But after that, do you remember any band breaking in the last 20 years? I don't mean boy bands or girl bands. I mean pop or rock bands.
Yeah.
Isn't
very few.
Isn't it strange? Why is this?
I don't know. Is it the music industry itself that wants to just have the one artist, and do they feel they can market them better? Perhaps, I don't know.
I don't know, because there are still clubs, there are still indie bands, indie and metal bands still are popular. But where are the big bands for arenas? I think it's strange.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm hopeful about the music industry. I don't really care so much about the worry about separating AI generated music from real music. It'll all work out in the end, I think.
Well, that's a very uplifting and positive note, because there's a lot of naysayers out there who would think otherwise. I think I'm with you. I think it's a bit like when the printing press came. It's there. We've just got to use it properly.
Sure.
And there are dangers, obviously, but and finally,
I speak to some friends who write music, and they say, "Hey, AI is fantastic. Now I don't have to rent a studio, rent musicians. I can do proper demos and finish them at home, and that's fantastic."
Yeah. Have you got any advice for any listeners who are musicians, perhaps younger ones, who want to enter the music industry as an artist?
Today you mean art, not to enter as an artist or as a music company person?
Well, we could probably answer both of those, but I think initially, that's a bonus question, that one. I think initially, any musicians who perhaps are young musicians, they may be a solo artist, they may be in a band, but they'd like to get into the music industry. What advice would you give them?
I think there are more opportunities today than ever before. And I think many people have the misconception that you can break without a record company or a music company. And I guess you can, but in the end, you need the muscle, you need the money behind to be able to break as an artist. I still haven't seen any major artist without a music company. But I mean, it's easier today than ever before to make sure you do proper demos and reach the companies. It's all very organized today. And of course, there are also more schools for when I was young and started, there were no marketing schools for record business, but today there are several schools concentrating on anything, sound engineer, marketing, being an artist, not to mention all these writing communities that people get together and write songs. So it's more organized today.
So if there was a band or an artist that wanted to get in touch with a music company, you mentioned there about a good demo. Who would they normally send it to? Would they send it to anybody in particular? What advice would you give them?
I think they should send it to the A&R guy, and often it would be difficult perhaps for them to find out who it is. I suggest they just use all the contacts they have and say, hey, do you know anyone who knows anyone who to make sure it reaches the right person. And it's not just Sony, Universal and Warner. There are many more smaller companies that they can try. And I think many companies still have an identity of being a pop label or a rock label, like we had in the 70s, when certain labels at EMI, Harvest was always a rock label, for instance. And so whatever music you have, you can approach the type of company you think would be interested.
Yeah. Well, Sven, thank you ever so much for this fantastic conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's been really interesting. Well, it's been really interesting talking to you and to talk to somebody who, like when I first met you in Stockholm, who has been right through what I would say was the golden age of rock and roll, right through to now. And what also is unique, I think, is your perspective about how you've got a sort of uplifted and positive impression for how things are going to go forward. So I think that's really encouraging to hear. So thank you ever so much for coming on. Sven Ake Peterson.
Thanks, Bob. It was fun.